What is workplace violence? How do you define it?
It's defined by the VA as any action that makes a person feel unsafe or uncomfortable. So it can be a verbal, it can be a threat, it can be bullying, intimidating behaviors. So it can be anything that makes that other person, when you're speaking with them or interacting with them, feel uncomfortable or unsafe.
Can you give me an example?
An example would be if somebody was threatening, like they're angry and they're saying, well, you're going to regret that, or I'm going to do something about that, or calling them names, employees' names, that are not their current names and their legal names.
And this can be workplace violence, veterans with employees, employees with veterans, employees to employee. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So we have, workplace violence could be from the community standpoint, and that's where you hear from the community. Someone comes on the campus, those kind of things. It can be also from an employee on an employee on a veteran on an employee, or a veteran on another veteran. So, I mean, it's the whole gamut of all of that.
So Keith, talk a little bit about how workplace violence relates to veterans, what you see on your end.
We're committed to providing an environment of care and committed to taking care of the veterans that served our country. And we want to make sure that it's a safe, welcoming environment.
A lot of our reports are where there was inappropriate communications between someone and another person. But there are times that it might get physical or threats or, even a little bit more than that. But for the most time, that is what it is.
So a lot of times it's miscommunication or the way someone is communicating with someone else and causes someone else to get upset and maybe
feel unsafe or uncomfortable. And that's the whole key factor, is if you can see that someone's feeling uncomfortable and unsafe or feeling uncomfortable, then that's a time to do a check with how you're presenting when you're talking with that person.
So Keith, if a veteran shows any type of violence, let's say at the VA, what happens?
The benefit of being at the VA, all of our resources are right there, even if it's after hours. But if we have to respond to a difficult situation involving a veteran, we will first try to make sure that the person reporting it is safe. We make sure that the patient receives the care that they deserve and need. And we will try to de-escalate with verbal de-escalation. We'll try to separate them, find out what resources we could utilize while they're there to identify why they're upset.
Is there some times when you maybe can't calm someone down and you may have to, have them leave the property, or what's like the worst case scenario?
Absolutely. And with situational law enforcement, we can find what resources we could take advantage of. If that subject continues to be disruptive, where other patients or employees cannot do their job or people can't get their care, then maybe we have to help them reschedule their appointment. VA police can't do that, but we will try to stay with them every step of the way. Ultimately, it could result in criminal charges. It could result in being criminally trespassed, even unfortunately being arrested. And that's not what the ultimate goal is. Ultimately is to give them the care that they need.
Can that happen whether it's in person or, let's say, even over the phone? If someone calls in a, threatening manner over the phone?
We always try to attempt to speak to the person that was the subject of the disruptor to get the full story, and then we'll communicate with the subject that the report is on, how they're disruptive, maybe if they're making threats or homicidal, suicidal ideations. Get both sides of the story. We'll encourage them to come in to speak with somebody with us being present. That's usually the first route we go. If it's something that requires further enforcement or investigation, we could send out we could request for health and welfare from the community, utilize some of our community resources such as CIT trained officers, crisis intervention trained officers.
And what about if it's a visitor that comes in and starts to act disruptive?
We treat that the exact same way we do any other person that visits the VA. If we could stop the disruptive behavior or help identify with the cause, we'll help them do so. But ultimately, it could result in a verbal warning to a written citation, a paid citation, additional criminal charges that are unnecessary, or jail time.
Mm-hmm. Or could you have them excluded from the VA premises for a certain length of time?
Yes, it could ultimately, and Karen will probably dive further into this with the Disruptive Behavior Committee, it could result in they would have to be escorted by VA police. They could have scheduled appointments that the only time that they're allowed on the VA premises. It could obviously affect their care, the timeliness that they want to get their care.
That's for a veteran, not for a visitor you're talking about.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And what about as far as employees, Karen? How is that handled when it's an employee that's acting disruptive?
It's looked at by a team that specializes in employee threat assessments. And so there's a reporting system that we use, and any employee can report an incident. And then either the disruptive behavior team that works with the veterans or the employee threat assessment team that works with the employees will review it, kind of investigate, and kind of figure out what is the best options for this. The purpose of the threat assessment team for the employees is not to bring out discipline actions, but it's more to figure out how do we keep our employees, our visitors, and our veterans safe while they're there at the campus. So it may not look like what most people might think it looks like, but it's there to really protect the campus from any type of violence.
So why is it important for everyone to know that any kind of disruptive behavior will not be tolerated?
Because if everybody knows that we're not going to tolerate disruptive behavior, it really helps to have veterans and their family and friends and caregivers to come in and get the treatment that they need in a more effective manner. And treatment does seem to be very effective for those that come in. It also knows that, we know as an employee at the VA that veterans have their own maybe coping ability or inability at times, and we need to really understand where that veteran's coming from. So it's very important for us to educate the staff along with the veterans on what is and what is not tolerated so that everybody knows what's going to be tolerated when they come to the VA. And there's no question in their mind how to react or how to understand what that is.
Keith?
Yeah, VA Police has zero tolerance for workplace violence, and that includes visitors, veterans, employees. And we do encourage continued training, education, and support. And difficult people is obviously an opportunity to find out what we could do. We continue to, serve our veterans, but we want to make sure visitors, patients, families have a very safe encounter.
And as far as Workplace Violence Awareness Week, what are you doing for the week to make sure that employees, veterans, and everyone, that they know even more so about disruptive behavior not being tolerated?
The Workplace Violence Awareness Week is all about bringing awareness to workplace violence and things that we do in the VA to help prevent it so that we can have a safe environment for everyone. So there's some public service announcements that we're working on and getting it out. We're also working with service chiefs so that we could go in and educate staff and get a schedule set up that we could go in and really work with the staff on what to do, how to do, because not everything classifies as workplace violence incidents, and we need to really understand what does and what doesn't.
All right, well, that is a good place to stop right there and take a break. And when we come back, we'll get more into the type of training that is available at the VA to handle any type of disruptive behavior. Back after this public service announcement.
America's veterans have sacrificed so much to protect our freedoms, and we need to show our gratitude. But how? Well, we can volunteer at a VA medical center or outpatient clinic, at a VA community living center, a veterans benefits office, or at one of our national cemeteries. We can also contribute online to help support veterans programs. Let's show our nation's heroes just how much we care. Volunteer or donate today to thank America's veterans.
We are back and talking about National Workplace Violence Prevention Awareness Week within the VA, and it's taking place the week of February 13th. Karen, what type of training is there for employees?
Right, and we take training very serious. So we have, when new employees are attending the new employee orientation, they have a training that they go through that talks about the first parts of it, which is de-escalating, identifying de-escalating, and then when they get back to their own areas, there is a whole curriculum that talks about what level the certain and specific areas of the hospital are in, and then we provide specific trainings to those areas and those staff. An example is if we have a area like maybe the ED where they have a lot more disruptive behaviors than maybe something like the inpatient medical units, they're going to get a lot more training on how to handle those situations, from de-escalation clear up to if they need to contain someone and take their rights away and those kind of things. So it's a lot of training that we do within the VA, and staff are always being trained. There's modules that are on computer-based and simulation models. There's also some in-person areas that we have to go in, and you have to learn how to really take down a person safely, make sure that everybody's safe, and you have to have those skills tests periodically in those areas.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Is the training for employees like a yearly thing, or does it depend on what section you're in?
Well, there are some trainings that are actually yearly trainings. Every year we look at our data from the previous years and we figure out what areas are considered high risk, moderate risk, or low risk. And the low risk are usually the computer-based trainings. They can attend the in-person trainings in the higher levels if they would like, but it's not so required. It's just an overview for them and a de-escalation. How do I handle someone that might be able to be de-escalated by how I respond? And it's more about them looking at themselves and what they can do to de-escalate the situation, opposed to portraying that we have to de-escalate this veteran. We need to look at ourselves and be able to respond appropriately. The ones that are at a higher risk, so there may be some times that a certain area may populate as a higher risk level one year, but not on another year. So that would change their level of risk. And those would change based on the year of the previous year, based on the data that we collect from the reporting systems that we have.
And you mentioned one area, you said the ED could be one of those areas, which means our emergency department is what we call that, right? Yes. All right.
Sorry about that. I used an acronym and I said I wouldn't.
And Keith, what about you? What kind of training does police get? Like, is this on a yearly basis or constantly or what?
The benefit of being part of the Dayton VA Police Department is that, like I said previously, the resources. We have an abundance amount of training that the officers are provided, but also we work very close with the workplace violence coordinator. In addition with that, we focus more on crucial conversations. But that's with all of our customers. And with crucial communications, we focus on reflective listening, tactful communications. We work on de-escalation, and that's part of that situational law enforcement I was discussing. And that's just some of the training that we get involved in.
And de-escalation really is probably the key to most of these incidents, I would suspect, correct?
Correct. Because if we can de-escalate someone, it prevents us from it escalating higher and possibly somebody getting charged or being presented to the disruptive behavior or needing to be escorted by the police. I mean, it can really help them get the treatment they need that day also, because they may have that moment, be able to work through and de-escalate and still keep their appointments, when other times if it escalates, there's times that they won't be able to keep their appointment that day, and we have to make sure that we can treat them what we need to.
So let's say an employee is seeing someone being disruptive. What can they do to report it? How do they report an incident?
We have a system in the VA called the Disruptive Behavior Reporting System, and all reports are put into that, whether it's an employee reported disruptor or whether it's a veteran or family member or caregiver. Once a report is made by the experiencer or someone that witnessed it, then the disruptive committee triage and the employee threat assessment triage teams will look at those to determine how serious the risk is. If there's immediate action that needs to be taken, then the team decides on a brief moment, what do we need to put in place until we can meet and really do a full assessment and really get good recommendations for the medical center director or the chief of staff to be able to make sure everybody's safe and yet our veterans get the care they need.
So that program is called DBERS for short.
Yes.
How long does something like that take to fill out? And is it mandatory for employees or someone to fill it out?
It is mandatory. If you see or you hear of something and you witness something, you should be reporting it. The VA wants to know these moments so that we can learn from them and we can work to make every employee feel safe and comfortable. If we don't get the reports, we can't do anything about it, and that's the important thing. So it is very important that if anyone sees or hears or experiences it, that they report it as soon as they possibly can. There are times that we would want them to contact the police, and that's if there's some kind of physical violence or assault going on or any criminal activity that has happened. We definitely want the police to be involved in all of that. But the workplace violence program works very closely with the police. I mean, it's just like we're back, we have each other on speed dial and that kind of stuff. So, we work very closely. So if we get something in and it's more where we think police need to get involved, we're going to contact them right away and we're going to talk about kind of what their process is. And they're probably going to do their process before the disruptive behavior or the ETAP program gets involved, because we want them to be able to do a thorough assessment of what happened and what they need to take on. There can be it can take anywhere from probably 5 minutes at the most to fill out a disruptive behavior report in the system. The things we want to look at is, how did the disruptor, was there any injuries to the disruptor after the event or during the event? Was there any injuries to the employees during that time? And what exactly happened? If someone tells me in a disruptive report that someone was yelling at me, that doesn't tell me the disruptive. But if they say, well, the gentleman called me a name, that I was stupid and I didn't, and that he was going to harm me, that brings a different kind of description of what we need to know to be able to make sure everybody's safe. So part of that team will reach out to the veterans, to the employees, just to kind of get a picture of the whole story.
And even if employees, let's say they get into a shouting match or something like that with each other, do they fill out a DBERS as well?
If they feel that it's a workplace violence incident where they feel unsafe or they feel uncomfortable, it is important to realize that not everything that is reported will be considered a workplace violence act, and that we have to really look at what the gist of what the definition is. And so there are times that we will get a report in there and it'll be sent back to the supervisor to address, because it may be a conflict between staff, but it may not classify as a workplace violence incident. And so we don't just let those drop. We refer them back to be able to get addressed because easily something that's two employees that don't get along can easily escalate if we don't have something going on and helping them get through that.
And Keith, what is the role for police when it comes to DBERS? Is it something that you guys receive every day, you look at every day?
Yes, we track every DBERS that comes in, and depending on what's in the justification, in the narrative part of the DBERS, what the disruptor or disruptee, whoever's reporting, depends on where it's going to, that's where the assessment comes in. If it needs an investigation where we identify possible or alleged physical harm or intimidation, menacing, we will investigate. Simply put, if it's something that is clearly identified as miscommunication between two employees, where it's just a shouting match where there wasn't any threats of harm, violence, or where it didn't affect cause harm to anybody, then we'll typically the committee will do the assessment and evaluation and determine from there where it goes.
Is there a time limit on when something has to be resolved once it's in the DBERS?
We work to resolve them as quickly as possible, and it depends on how the significance of the event is. So there's times that it's a very quick response and very quick to maybe a week or two to get up to the chief of staff or to the medical director, and others take a lot more because there may be more employees or more veterans involved, and we have to really do our due diligence on really getting an understanding of what happened. And we are blessed on both the Disruptive Behavior Committee and the ETAT, the Employee Threat Assessment Team, to have officers on both of those committees, so they are part of our triaging as we go through every DBERS that gets put into the system.
Anything else you want to say on that?
I think Karen said it perfect. Is that working close together helps determine what kind of resources and response option from police, and also from the Workplace Violence Coordinator and the DBERS Committee.
Now, there is a 3-step approach for keeping everyone safe. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. One is be proactive, and that's where we're saying if you see something, you hear something, you do something. You know, you report it, you go through training, those kind of things. The other one is be aware. Be aware of your environment. Be aware of what's going on around you. If you hear something, don't just walk by and let, if somebody's, talking a little loud, you don't just walk by and let the other person deal with that, but you just kind of be aware of what's going on, and you can report it to somebody else or that kind of stuff. So that's the be aware. And then the other part is report it. If you see something, you've got to report it. There's no way we can keep the environment safe if we don't know what's truly going on, and we can't be everywhere. And so we rely on everybody to do their part in keeping everyone safe.
All right, sounds good. Now we are going to take one more break, and we will be back with some parting words.
A lot of us had trouble when we got back, adjusting to family life and our jobs.
Order up. When I want to give up, I try to focus on getting to the next minute, then the next hour, and the next day.
It might not seem like it right now, but there are people out there like me who want to listen and support you for the long haul.
And I found someone to talk to, someone who listened.
You are not alone.
And we are back talking about Workplace Violence Prevention Awareness Week, which is at the VA, and it's the week of February 13th through the 17th. And Karen, I want to ask you, what is the main message that you want people to get out of this?
So what I'd like to do is challenge everyone at the Dayton VA, when you're coming to the Dayton VA, to really work to help prevent workplace violence. Do your part. We want every appointment to be the best it can be for every veteran. So when you come in to your appointment the first time to the last one, we want it to get better, 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 better the whole way through. And we know that we're not always going to offer the treatment that you think that you need at the time that you come in. And we understand that. But you are the expert of yourselves and what you're going through. And our providers are experts in evidence-based treatments. And so they might offer you something that you haven't thought about. Please be supportive in understanding that maybe it's time to take a time out and you gather the information you need, you go home, you do some research, and you come back and talk about it, and not get disruptive during that visit because they didn't give you what you thought you felt like you needed. We're here to serve you. We're here to help you. It may not look like what you think it should be, but we really, really want to be part of your team to make you the best you can be.
And Keith, what about you? Same question.
Safety is the ultimate goal. We want to make sure our staff, all employees are safe, to include the visitors, patients. And if you do observe a disruptive behavior, something that's even physical, we want to make sure your safety is ultimate. And we want you to call the VA police, and we want you to report exactly what you saw, what you heard. But if there's an opportunity for somebody that's just disruptive, and maybe see if there's other avenues to communicate with that person. And we encourage everybody to report any and all incidents, and then let the assessment team, the VA police, and all the other resources come together to figure out the best avenue of approach.
Thank you both very much for being here. I think this is a very important topic. It's something that everyone who comes to the Dayton VA needs to be aware of. So I thank you for sharing your valuable information.
And thank you for having us here, because anytime we can talk about what we can and can't do and how we address workplace violence, it's so important to be able to do that. So thank you.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And that is another edition of Veterans Health Today. Veterans, if you want information about enrolling at the Dayton VA, you're encouraged to call the Medical Center at 937-268-6511, extension 2035. Or you can call one of our 5 community-based outpatient clinics, or CBOCs, and you see the numbers there on your screen. Thank you so much for watching this program, and veterans, thank you for serving a grateful nation. We'll see you next time.